Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Hello.
How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm glad you're able to find the link and everything. Marisol and I just reviewed the script, and hopefully people will start joining in to see if we have to do any last minute adjustments.
Sounds good.
Anything particularly that you were thinking that we should be thinking about, or Marisol as the moderator should be thinking about for today?
Any changes you're talking about?
Right, or any particular topic or thing that we should try to, think about, or sort of underline stress as beyond what we prepared. Just sometimes things come up and you're like, oh, this would be really good to say.
I for my part, I liked the way that it was laid out. It made sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, same for me.
Awesome. So we don't have a thriver in the presentation today, right?
I think we do.
We do have, Jamie, you might be able to confirm this better than I can. Yeah, Jamie Johnson will be on. I don't know if she prefers the terminology thriver. Jamie Beck, you might know that better than me, but yes, she's going to be joining us.
Okay. And so I guess, since she wasn't at the meeting, I believe, is there somebody who can double check that she's getting on now?
I'm sorry?
Is there, since she was in the meeting, in a prep meeting, can somebody check if she's signing on now?
Yeah, I've been in touch with her today. She's joining.
Okay.
we're waiting for a couple people, so we'll wait to see if, so other people sign in, and then a couple minutes before 2, we'll get on Facebook Live.
Can you tell me how I pronounce your first name? I don't want to misdo it. Is it Alor?
Yes, Alor is good.
Oh, I'm Hannah from PCI. Nice to meet you. As you mentioned, we had people who weren't able to be on the call last week. So I just want to introduce you really quickly to Jamie Johnson from Sisters of the Streets. There she is.
Hi, Jamie.
I think you have like introductions of all of us, but I'm not sure if you have Jamie's yet. So I want to create that space before we get started.
So what we're going to do is have you, and Alicia and I sort of discuss this briefly, because like Ms. Johnson wasn't be able to have you introduce yourselves.
Okay.
So about yourself. We have 10 minutes for this, so each of us can take a couple minutes, about our background, our organization, why are we here, kind of deal.
Okay. So
Does that work?
Sounds good.
Thank you for doing this, Jamie.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And we'll be entering shortly to the discussion. I guess, who is there? Somebody still missing? We have Jim. I was just trying to check if
We're still missing Marisa Ugarte.
Marisa. Yeah, Marisa still. I'm gonna text her right now because it's getting close. Bien, bien. ¿Ya vamos a entrar a Zoom? Pues ya ahorita, ¿no? Ya, hace 10 minutos. No, no, pues ya hay que entrar porque entramos todos desde Zoom y luego a Facebook. Órale, pues, bye. Órale, pues, bye. I just called Marisa and she answered, so she's going to be joining pretty, hopefully in a minute or two. So Marisol, I think, doing this with the new connection between Zoom and Facebook Live, you will see on your top left corner where it says recording. This is being recorded. It will say when it goes live.
Okay.
And so you don't have to wait for a signal. It will take a few seconds, and so we will wait, till 2 to get on, and so it will be exactly a 2. But a 2, once you see that, then you can start with your introduction.
Okay.
And I will get myself off of camera for today. I'll be here. Obviously, I'll hear everything, but so we still have about 5 minutes. But just so you know that that's the real signal that we're live. I think we've seen everybody's camera, but I don't think we got a chance to see Jamie Beck. Jamie's your camera and your light. Is it work? Oh, good. Just wanted to double check.
Ahí está, mira.
Perfecto, Marisa. Thank you.
Sorry,
Just
I'm
want to
just
make sure.
finishing up my lunch.
And I think we could
I
hear
made
each
it.
other. So perfect. Thank you. Marisa, could you lower the camera a little bit? Could they help you so that you're more in the middle? There we go. A little less.
There?
There we go.
Okay.
Perfecto. Y entonces a las 2, so at 2 p.m. we're going to start a transition, and it's Marisol who's going to start us off when she sees the Facebook Live, red button on the top left corner. And as we said, just kind of reviewing, she will welcome, then have a very brief statement about the sponsors and why are we here, and then they'll go to introductions. And so she'll pass it on, and then we'll get right to the questions. And so we're just a couple minutes away. Last thing, so I'll be here. I'm going to be off camera. But if you mention websites, if you want to put on the chatter, or I'll look them up anyway, and they'll go in the comment section. So when people are watching the video, like the San Diego Commission on the Status of Women, that will go in there. The E3 Alliance, each of the organizations, there'll be their website in there. And I'm going to wait till you start talking so people can associate it with your conversation. But if you want to mention something, a number, a website, as you mentioned it, I'm already looking it up so that it can go in the comments.
Are there people, is this just on Facebook Live, or is there, are you having participants in the actual Zoom as well?
No, just, I mean, there probably is. We send invitations and all those things. But what we found at this time of the day, not a lot of people can make it. They're at work or they're doing something else. And so what we get is through the boost, we get responses. Our last video reached more than 20,000 people.
So you're just streaming to okay. So it's just streaming to Facebook Live and we can share from there. Okay.
Mostly has been little questions. Also, some of the topics we touch is just not so easy sometimes to share. So people kind of the message as opposed to do a question sometimes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
But if there are, I will bring them up, in Zoom. I'll say somebody asked this question.
Sounds good.
Awesome, thank you, Jamie. So we're going to go on. If you can all turn your cameras about in a minute.
Sorry if I missed this. I was multitasking. So who's asking us questions?
Marisol will be posting the questions.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I'm very behind today.
No worries, no worries.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for being with us today, and welcome to this month's presentation of Equity Matters, sponsored by King Center for Social Balance, San Diego County Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, and the Employee Rights Center. My name is Marisol Turincio. I'm the campaign manager for the Employee Rights Center, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's presentation. Also, I want to introduce some of the panelists, but first, I want to tell you that today we're going to talk about human trafficking. Why is this so important for us? First of all, this is one of the most shameful crimes in the world. Till today, in this modern age, we're still having this issue. And we have to come up and talk about it more often because it keeps happening. It keeps happening in every country. It keeps happening to kids, to women, to men. And just ignoring this fact is not gonna make it go away. Many people, millions of people every year is being forced into exploitation situations. This is the worst epidemic. We have to talk about it because how do we talk with our families, with our kids about this issue? It's not only to be aware and to make a prevention situation more like normal and regularized, but also inclusion. Why if these people, these drivers, these people suffering, these survivors already have to suffer from all this exploitation, also have to suffer from the explosion of the community, from society. And part of equity, that means equality, is to be aware of how can we help people in this situation to succeed. And today with us, I have many presentators, panelists that is gonna help us see how can we do better as a society, organization, as a person. So I'm gonna let each of you introduce yourselves, talk a little bit of your organization, and tell us like really fast why you guys are here. Let's start with Marisa.
Hello. My name is Marisa Ugarte, and I am the Executive Director and Founder of Bilateral Safety Corridor Coalition. We do the 4 Ps: prevention, protection. We help with the girls testified under prosecution and partnerships. I'm glad to be here and be part of this panel. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Marisa. Hannah?
Hi, my name is Hannah Allen. I work for Project Concern International, focusing on our E3 Alliance, Employers Ending Exploitation. This is an alliance that invites the private sector into accepting their role in the fight to end trafficking. We provide prevention education to employers and also opportunities to get engaged in the movement.
Thank you, Hannah. Sarah Colby?
Hi, I am the Vice President of Programs for San Diego SHRM, and I'm also the founder and principal consultant for Kelfi HR Consulting. And I provide human resources services to both individuals and organizations, but I have a passion around creating more kind and compassionate treatment for others, regardless of our differences, which is what draws me to this topic here today.
Thank you. Jamie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Beck. I'm the president and managing attorney of Free to Thrive. We're a Southern California-based nonprofit that provides legal services and other support to survivors of human trafficking. And I'm here today with really what I've seen and what I've learned from my clients about their own experiences, both barriers to employment and how to overcome those barriers.
Thank you. And lastly, but very important guest today, we have a survivor, a triber, Jamie Johnson.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. It wouldn't let me tap. Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Jamie Johnson. I'm a lived experience expert on urban domestic sex trafficking, and I am the CEO of an organization called Sisters of the Streets, and we focus on harm reduction through empowerment for those that have been impacted by the sex trade. And we focus a lot on the discussion around prevention, but through accountability and the root issues of society that really help exploitation thrive. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for being with us. And we're gonna have on chatter the information of the organization so you can have more information. Also, the Employee Rights Center helping the community with employment issues and immigration as well, naturalizations. And we're here because it's important, because part of have a better health and all the global work, like how to get a better healthy community and employees, is to actually talk about this issue and try to find a way to make the life of all the employees better. So we're gonna start with some questions. These questions about all this issue, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna be like telling you when to come to the next one. I'm sorry, it's not that I'm gonna cut you out, but it's so everyone has a chance to talk and participate. My first question will be for Marisa. In your experience serving in human trafficking, what barriers have you noticed have constantly impeded attain employment?
I've seen in the, can you repeat it again, Marisol, because my sound is not so good. Hold on.
So in your experience in human trafficking, working in human trafficking, what are the most barriers that you have finding people?
Okay, so basically the number one barrier is for the international victims, it's that they cannot work because they haven't obtained their work permits. So that is extremely difficult. It takes sometimes on a TV cell to 2 years or more to be able to get a work permit, and very difficult to get a continued presence. On the domestic trafficking cartel clients, some of them have not finished high school, so we have to pass them through a GED or a diploma. That's one. And two, finding exactly what is it that they would like to do and where to apply and guide them through that process is one of the things that sometimes is difficult for them. Um, they are also learning how or what is it that they are good at. Sometimes the low self-esteem has not let them move forward to really know what you're good at. If it's, you know, in computers, is it daycare, is it social services, whatever is necessary. It takes a bit of time to come together and also know that. And obviously getting the jobs is the other difficult part, especially as you know, Jamie knows, if you have a full record of you know, warrants and arrests and things, it's very difficult for them to get a real job.
Thank you, Marisa. Hannah, the same question for you.
You just give me the question again, Marisol.
Yes. In your experience working with survivors and human trafficking, what are the barriers that you notice more constantly to be issued?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes a criminal record can be a massive barrier. Finding our way to employment opportunities, traditional employment opportunities, and also not having the traditional work experience in your background can make it seem as though you might not meet qualifications for a job, but we know so often that people who've experienced exploitation are incredibly powerful, resilient individuals with extensive skill sets that just might not look the same on a resume as someone else's.
Thank you. Sarah? I know you don't work direct like Hannah or Marisa, but what do you think is the barrier that is more constantly for human trafficking survivors?
Well, like you said, I have not worked with specific people, survivors of that. But I think that these issues that both Marisa and Hannah brought up are significant in background checks that employers might do, and in being able to recognize what your qualifications are that an employer might be interested in, and how to take your life experience and express it in a way that would be interesting to a company to hire you. I think that that's a challenge, connecting the two sides and seeing where they relate.
Definitely. Thank you. Jamie Beck?
Sure, I think, I think it's already been covered. The barriers of a criminal record cannot be overstated. Just to give our audience a data point, according to one survey of survivors, 95% have a criminal record, and that, people might think, oh, make certain kind of assumptions about what's on that record. Our clients have all kinds of things on their record. The kind of the thing that people are most likely to think of as prostitution, but actually the most prevalent on our clients' records are drug charges. And they also have theft charges and, some kind of small infraction charges all the way up to very serious crimes. And depending on what job you're trying to get, that can be a major barrier. Any licensed profession, you pretty much can't get a license if you have a criminal record, and anything in the medical profession, a drug charge, you won't be able to get a job in the medical profession. So, we've had clients apply for dog walking jobs and they do background checks and they can't even, do a simple dog walking or Uber Eats, jobs that are more accessible for survivors. They can't.
Definitely. Very, very important to talk about this subject. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. And for, let me see if I'm pronouncing properly, Jamie Johnson? Jamie or Jamie?
Just Jamie.
Jamie.
I just have an extra E.
It sounds like French. The question for you is, as a life experience expert, what issue do you see is the biggest barrier or concern for survivors re-entering the workforce or potentially entering the workforce on the first time?
So I think outside of what's already been covered, I think the legal aspect is understandable. I think on the side, I guess from the lived experience side, coming into a space that is not trauma informed or is not understanding of the way that trauma processes, and not just in the workforce or in the workplace, but as a community, we are not really set up to receive people that have experienced certain sets of traumas. And so we tend to get people ready for employment through mock interviews, or getting them ready physically in how they're dressed and their attire. But what we don't really focus a lot on is the life skills that come or get taken away from us when we are in our exploitation, such as eye contact, or such as just being able to sit in a room with strangers without feeling uncomfortable, being able to communicate that you're feeling stressed out, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling uncomfortable. We kind of have skipped a step, I feel, in the workforce that just assumes people know how to hold a job. When you come from a space that you get to make your own schedule pretty much, or somebody else is making it for you, and you're up at all types of hours of the evening, and you are going from city to city and you're traveling, it's hard to buckle down and get into the mode of 9 to 5 and get up, and to know that if you need to call out, you don't just not show up, you have to call and explain that you're sick or that you can't make it into work those days. And I also think that along with that, we haven't really set up HR departments in a way that are understanding to things like PTSD and trauma responses that often come with the exit from the exploitation. And so oftentimes that puts us in a position to either get fired or feel inadequate. So we quit our jobs, and then we're back at square one trying to figure out how to survive. So I think I would say that preparing the workspace in a trauma-informed educational approach is something that is lacking.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. And yes, that's very important. And we actually gonna take that subject today about dealing with trauma and how that affects at work. So it's a very, very important point, and it's part of our panel today. This question is for Sarah, and is speaking in general terms with application and assessing employability. Sorry about the word. Can you share with us, from the employer's perspective, what they are looking for in hiring someone?
Sure. I do first want to say I'm looking forward to that next part, because Jamie, you made a lot of great comments that I look forward to us talking about. But for this part of it, there are a few things other than specific job skills. You know, if somebody's going to be a programmer, they need to know the programming language, and that's very specific to the job. But in general, what employees are looking for, or if it's for a job where there aren't specific job skills and it's more just working experience, in general, what they're looking for is some kind of evidence of reliability and capability of growth and thinking analytically or creatively. And there are ways that that can be demonstrated without a traditional job history. So reliability might be showing that you've completed a certificate or some sort of a degree program, something that's an actual program that has a finite end. If you had any school projects, and that can be in high school, it can be anything that is a project that you completed, or it can even be outside of school. It can be a different kind of project if you worked with an organization or a group of people, something along those lines, or any kind of awards or acknowledgements for something that you did. That shows completion, follow through, et cetera. And then for capability of growth, it could be job progression if you had that. It could also be taking some sort of a leadership role or a mentorship role in some sort of an organization or committee. It doesn't have to be a paid situation. And then a couple other things are, if there's some sort of an idea, something that you came up with and you implemented it, whether you implemented it or somebody else did, and it had a positive impact on other people. So it's like, well, I thought of this, kind of initiated it, and it turned into something that had a positive impact. That can be demonstrated. Another is similar to that is identifying the solution to a problem, and that resulted in some sort of resolution of the problem. And so these are all things that can be demonstrated through a job, but also can be demonstrated in other ways. And if you get somebody that can help you translate your experience into that, you can have some strong things on your resume, even without the specific work experience.
Thank you. So yeah, definitely is a big barrier in this subject. We're gonna follow. You say you want to say something more about the other question, Sarah, before we move to the.
Well, that'll take us right into the other section. So maybe I'll hold off until we go through the right path.
So Marisa again, in your experience serving tribers and human trafficking, what issues have you noticed in maintaining an employment? You're on mute.
Basically, that's one of the things that is that somebody thinks that when a girl goes into a job, they think, oh, this is the job, this is it. And then a month passes, maybe two, and they say, I'm not that happy. I don't think this is for me. I think I better find another job, and they quit. That is something that we are trying to solve in making sure that the clients that are going to apply for the job are going to apply to something that they really, really want. And, giving them the skills before, through adult education or other programs like, two-year college or something like that has really helped a lot. We have had a great success on that with one of our girls is a CNA and is working in a hospice. Another one started working at a 7-Eleven, and finally she got a job that she wanted. She cleans airplanes, and she's part of a group of people that have all the kind of support that she needs, benefits and everything. So she waited for it for a very long time. So finding the right fit is what is really important, so you don't have the job turnover.
Thank you, Marisa. Hannah, same question.
I don't work directly with survivors of exploitation as it comes to job placement. More the role that I do is with businesses and employers and preparing employers on how, first of all, on what is human trafficking, the fact that it does exist in our community, that there are lots of things that contribute to it, even looking at technological infrastructure that traffickers use to facilitate trafficking. There's lots of crossover between business and trafficking. And so first, the first barrier for us is to find the opportunity to train a business. Sorry, I'm hearing an echo. Anyway, it is also frustrating to expect people with extensive skill sets, but not extensive history in traditional job environments to take an entry-level position with a low level of responsibility and feel like they ever have an opportunity to grow or excel in their career position. And so we do our best to try to prepare businesses to lead with a more trauma-informed approach, which is better for all employees, not just employers who employ survivors of exploitation.
Thank you. Jamie Beck, same question, please. Jamie Beck.
I feel like my internet's cutting out. Am I? Okay, sorry. Can you just repeat the question?
Yes. The question was like, in your experience serving tribers and human trafficking, what issues have you noticed in maintaining unemployment?
I mean, I think really what all the other speakers highlighted. I don't have anything to add besides that.
Jamie,
I think I know Jamie was the trauma issues, and I think that's a really important to talk about. So maybe Jamie could talk more about the impact of trauma on survivors and how it's in the workplace.
Yeah, I was about to ask her what is her opinion, so we can all learn more about this.
So I think something that to me is very obvious is no matter if somebody else is in control of your money or you were in control of your money during your exploitation, the reality is that even if it was being handed over to somebody else, you saw a lot of money comes in and out of your hands at some point. And so when you are partnering that with, like I mentioned earlier, kind of that free range. It sounds funny to say because exploitation, you're under the control of somebody else more than likely. But in our minds, we have the ability to travel. As you know, as I mentioned, we have the ability to not have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and sit in traffic and go to a job that we don't necessarily want to do for $10 or $13 an hour. And so the barrier that I see the most, and a barrier that was with myself, was like, I'm doing a lot of work for a little bit of money. And I think that when you have been exposed to money that, you know, especially illegal money, that's hard to forget. Once you know something to get you through your survival, you don't unknow it. And so that hustle mentality that money is kind of, it's not really much to me because it comes and goes. Getting rid of that mentality, and as Marissa had pointed out, we don't necessarily have the social skills to know, like, hey, I don't like this job, I'm going to give my 2-week notice. You don't give 2-week notices at strip clubs or on escort sites or walking on the streets. During your exploitation, you just stop doing it if you don't like it and you move to the next city. And so breaking that mentality is very difficult, and that in itself hinders us from being able to get further employment that we may really enjoy, because on our track record, it shows that we just left a job without notice, or we had all these days sick and we didn't call our employer. And so there's these social skill barriers that exist, on top of the fact that $13 to $15 an hour is just not a lot of money. And you don't like working 80 hours and seeing an $800 paycheck. And then you have taxes being taken out when you know that you can go back to a situation that maybe is somewhat abusive, maybe is not exactly what you're wanting to do every day, but comparing it to getting up and busting your butt for 10 hours a day and you're still not happy. Sometimes you pick the one that you feel more monetarily beneficial. And it's easy to go back into those survival patterns that just were a lot easier than having to answer to a boss, or feeling like you are not adequate in the workspace, or feeling like you're not appreciated, or feeling like you don't fit in, or feeling like people are judging you because they heard this or that about your past. And so again, creating that space to where it comes down to, we have to have something tangible and of the same value or more value to offer people that we're trying to get out of their current situations. If I don't have something better for you to come to and offer you, and something that really pulls on your passion and your heart, then I might as well stop trying to entice you to get away from the lifestyle that you're already creating. And we have to understand too, that not everybody is in a position where, you know, the imagery that's given to us is malnourishment, is people just suffering every day. There's a lot of people that are escorting and prostituting that have really high house notes, that are living in big houses, that have really high car notes every month, that have created a lifestyle for themselves that is very luxurious in a lot of ways monetarily. And to tell them to leave that to come to a $13 an hour job is not very enticing to them, no matter how abusive their situation may be from our perspective. And so we have to understand that we have to create something that is enticing for that person to exit their situation.
Thank you for that. And we're gonna go back to that. This question right now is for Sarah. And it's also about what Jamie was saying, like about the trauma right? How the employers are or are not ready to work with trauma. Uh, so as we discussed this, the implication of this trauma under the law can be classified as a disability. Sarah?
Yeah, so it can, and this is a topic I've been thinking about, especially this last year. I think that we're going to have many more employees in the workplace coming forward with trauma in their background and potentially addiction struggles and whatnot. And as we transition out of the pandemic, I think these are issues that we're going to have to be aware of and sensitive to. Like Hannah was saying, we need to have our employers be familiar with trauma and and how to deal with it. And so thinking about that and just thinking about the rights of an employee in general, if you have a disability going into the workplace, whether it's a mental health or intellectual or physical, whatever it might be, there are some key points for everyone to be aware of. So, so I'm going to try and blow through them, but if I should go into more detail on anything, let me know. So for one, employers are not allowed to discriminate or harass or allow discrimination or harassment of their employees based on a disability or even the perceived disability. So, and they can't make any hiring or employment decisions based on that. So it doesn't even have to be disclosed, it's just a perception of it. And if there's somebody in the office doing that, then the employer has a responsibility to stop it. So how you deal with that as the employee, there's a few things, but one is you might need some accommodation. So an accommodation might be for, maybe there are certain situations that can trigger you. And so you can't be in those kinds of situations. Maybe it's a large meeting or in a small room, or maybe you need frequent breaks, or physically, maybe you need to use the restroom once an hour, or things along those lines. So there are some things to know that when you might need some kind of accommodation, what your rights are around that. Employers have the obligation to accommodate disabilities within reason. Outside of reason might be something like, as an example, if somebody is being hired as a typist, so you need to transcribe on a computer something, but you can't actually type. And so somebody else would have to do the typing, but the whole point of your job is to do the typing, then you can't do the core responsibility. And that's not really reasonable to hire somebody else to do the job you're supposed to do. However, if your job is to write something, it could be that it's reasonable to purchase some voice recognition software, and you could do it verbally, and you can do the writing and the editing and everything. So that would be a reasonable accommodation. So some other points on that, though, are to know that you are never, ever obligated to share the nature of your disability or even the fact that you have a disability with anyone. That's always your choice. And once you do share it with somebody, that person never, ever has the right to share that information as well. There are some boundaries to that. If you need some accommodations, there might be something of the nature of what the accommodation is, but what the actual disability is, or the fact that you have one is not their position to share it. So when you ask for an accommodation, an employer never has the right to ask you about the nature of the disability. They can't say, well, what is wrong with you, or anything along those lines. And they can't even ask you, if you have a disability, do you have a disability? You seem like you struggle with blah, blah, blah. They can't do that. They are allowed to ask you a few things, though, that you should be prepared for. So one is, during the hiring process, they are allowed to ask you, are you capable of performing the core functions of this role with or without reasonable accommodation? And if your answer is yes, even if it involves a reasonable accommodation, that's all you have to say. You don't have to explain further during the hiring process. Once you get hired, if you need an accommodation, you can request it at that time, but you're not required to do it ahead of time. And then when you do make the accommodation, you have the right to expect confidentiality to the extent possible, and to not disclose, as I said, your specific disability or the cause of your disability. Why you have a disability is not a requirement to share that. The one other thing that your employer has the right to ask is, do you have a doctor's certification of this accommodation that you're requesting? And that certification, it doesn't mean they're not telling your employer what the issue is, they're telling you what you need. So it's so-and-so needs a break at once an hour for 10 minutes, whereas the law might be a 10-minute break once every 4-hour block. And this says once an hour, you need 10 minutes. They cannot ask you, well, why do you need that, or anything along those lines? And your doctor should know and would not provide that as well. It's only the fact that you need the accommodation, what that accommodation is.
Thank you. Is the size of the business of matter for this accommodation?
It could matter, yes. So right now, the Americans with Disabilities Act covers employers with 15 or more employees. So the really small employers aren't necessarily covered by that because it can be more difficult for them to provide accommodations. Additionally, the smaller the employer, even if they are covered by the ADA, they have fewer resources to provide accommodations. So for example, a large company like Walmart or Amazon would be able to handle the cost of accommodations or adjusting roles because they have multiple people doing similar roles. They might be able to adjust them a little bit to accommodate. Then a small company that maybe has 20 employees with minimal profit, if any, and maybe they don't have the duplicate roles to adjust responsibilities potentially at times. So the law might be a little bit different with the really small employers, but then it just becomes a matter of resources that the company might have. So the size, it can matter, but it's not an absolute.
Thank you, Sarah. And this question might be for everyone. It's just like an opinion. You think employers are ready to work with a culture of trauma? Or what do we need to bring to the plate so this can be better, we can do better on employee side? Anyone would like to share something?
I'll go. I think, so when you say, are we ready to work with cultures that have experienced trauma? I think that right there is part of the issue in our society, is recognizing, is compartmentalizing who has trauma and who, like, we all have trauma, right? And so it's like, when we're looking to certain groups of populations or certain populations, we are separating them from ourselves because we don't necessarily have the same experience, but that's not what's important. The experience that caused the trauma is not really as important as the foundation of what trauma is. And if we can recognize that we all have trauma and we all are already working in a workspace full of people with trauma, I think there's this myth that we go to work and we leave all our problems at the door. And that, I think, is a very toxic way to approach workspace. And I think that is a reason why a lot of us are so traumatized without being exploited, without being coming from underserved communities and marginalized populations. I think that we are force ourselves to pretend that life is separate from work or life is separate from employment. And if we all could just come into this space to recognize, hey, so-and-so is having a bad day. Jamie looks like she's not having the best of days. Like, let me be a little nicer to her. Let me leave her alone today, whatever the case is, versus telling people that they have to leave their life at the door and come and put on a front and then go home and address it when we spend 8 to 10 hours in the workspace. If we can fix that to the point where we are just being human to each other in the workspace or outside of the workspace, then I think that in itself can really start creating this shift around the conversations that we're having right now of equity and realizing that people are not much different than us, no matter what their experience is. And when we don't put ourselves in a position to think that we are superior because we are the business owners or whatever the case is, we start really recognizing people as our equals. I think that before any trainings that we can get works, life skills through, or work skills, just bringing back the humane aspect within the workplace is going to be the first step that needs to happen before anything else is really addressed. So yeah, I think we need to stop compartmentalizing who has trauma, who is worthy of having work, who is capable of having work, and really just start addressing our communities as a community, and being there for each other to embrace and want to just see lives in a healthier space, versus questioning, is this person adequate enough to come into my workspace? I think that we need to change our approach and our language around these conversations.
Thank you, Jamie. Anyone else would like to add something?
I think what you said was beautiful. It was right on in that, and because it addresses everybody. It's not a particular group. It's not that one group needs to now be treated differently or better. It's across the board. And trauma, like you said, everybody experiences it at some point. And who we are, what our experiences have been, influences our ability to process the trauma and move forward despite the trauma or with the trauma. And our workplaces right now, we've developed, especially in the United States, a very unhealthy behavior of, well, you just have to push through it, fight through it, just push and work, 60 hours a week. And then someday we'll get to that magic place where we don't have to do it. And in the meantime, we're just, pushing everyone into a very bad place. And so my opinion on this right now, of some of the things that an employer can do, is we do need to create more respectful workplaces. We do need to continue to not just train, but also live into values of anti-discrimination, anti-harassment, and through that, a better understanding of mental health, which includes trauma and all the other aspects of mental health that go into that. And as we address those and make ourselves more capable in the workplace, and having cultures that are more open to that, and normalizing the concepts of trauma and disability, that the just a huge number of our population has something in their background, and we can choose to ignore it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't manifest, and it doesn't mean that we don't need to address it at some point. So I agree with you. Across the board, we need to work on that and have more training. And the concept of training is a little bit limiting, because it is training. We want to create awareness, we want to create knowledge, we want to create skills, and it's also about creating the culture, having values that we live and breathe, and hold people accountable. That's where we're at.
Yes, definitely. It was a strong statement, and you're totally right. We all have a trauma. So this is why we do this, equity. This is what we do. We bring in this to make the awareness of, like, as you say, the work culture like we have now is toxic, like you say, and we need to change that. Anyone would like to add something?
I'll just add, I really wholeheartedly agree with everything that Jamie and Sarah said. We're moving into a space where we hear a lot about being trauma informed in social services, in kind of medical and mental health. As a lawyer, we are not trained on trauma, and I'm working on having the legal profession be more trauma informed. And I think another area where we need to be more trauma informed is have trauma informed employers and trauma informed workplaces. And that starts with an understanding of what trauma is, how it will impact your employees, how you build a cohesive, team environment that truly is supportive, and not just, like Sarah was talking about, just working your employees so hard that you're not actually taking into account that, like even this last year, we all have suffered multiple societal traumas. Living through a pandemic, we have major social movements happening that impact people's day-to-day lives, and we're all trying to process that while we get up and go to work every day. And that alone is it's challenging, right? And how do you, as an employer, take that into account. What happens, you know, on a day when, you know, like the day after the Atlanta shootings, and, you know, so many of the major events that have happened, you know, I can't even list one because there's so many of how do you as a workplace create a safe space for your employees to process the things that they're experiencing as a result of just what's happening around them, let alone their own interpersonal traumas and everything they're going through with COVID and whatnot. There's a lot that we as employers can do. You know, we at Free to Thrive, we do mindfulness meditations for our staff. We have emotional check-ins. We share stories about success stories to remind ourselves why we do this work and the impact that we're having on our clients. You know, things like that are really important to creating a supportive workplace. And you know, it's different for every employer of what's the right culture is for your organization, but it's something that I really hope that in the future employers really start to take being trauma informed seriously as a, not just because it's the right thing to do, but as a way to retain employees, a way to, you know, improve the overall well-being of your staff.
Thank you, definitely. And for good, you already touched the subject that I was gonna enter to. What are the steps that you think it needs to be implemented in the short future, you know, for really going towards meeting gender equity at work? Like you say, some goals, some stories of success, but anyone else would like to say something like you think it should be implemented?
Well, I think that there are some quick things when I think about just an HR professional inside of a company. What can they do right now if somebody's thinking, okay, well, you know, I want to see if we have an issue and whatnot. You can do a very quick assessment. There are some tools that you can do online. Potentially, you can also talk to a company like E3 Alliance or that organization and engage. But some simple things you can do yourself is you can look at, do you have disparity in compensation, in your benefits, in promotions? What does that look like? What does your leadership team look like? Do you see the diversity that you would like to have? So that's a very easy, just numbers, you see the data, but then you also do look back at your values that I mentioned before. Look at what those values are, and do those values actually foster an equitable workplace and healthy behaviors? And then once you have those values, do you actually use them? Are they embedded into your programs like performance management? Are they part of what people are measured against? Is it part of the regular ongoing conversation that your leadership is having with their employees? Is there back and forth feedback, et cetera? You can look at all of those things immediately and see if you've got an issue and see if you have anything in place that helps you move in the right direction. And if not, you start to work on those very, very basic things. But that's just the immediate short term to get you towards the long term.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. In an effort to have a trauma-informed group, I just want to share I have a pain condition that does require some accommodations, like Sarah said, and I'm having a hard time. So if my speech gets interrupted, please just forgive me. I'll be right back. But thank you for the shout out about E3. When businesses say they want to become involved in the movement, or we have a business leader who's like, yeah, I want to hire survivors of exploitation, we try to handle that process as delicately and as careful as possible, because we're not here to say like, oh, that person will employ a survivor of exploitation. What we want to do is like lay a foundation of education about what human trafficking is, what commercial sexual exploitation is, what it looks like, who's affected by it, who's vulnerable to it, who helps perpetuate the problem, why do people do these things. And so first things first for businesses that want to get involved and create a safer place for survivors to work is that you have to lay organization-wide education. You need this organization-wide educational foundation, not just from a champion in human resources or a CEO who really cares about the cause. The entire business needs the educational foundation to understand, okay, this is really happening. Now I know how to look for it within my business. Now I know how to look for it when I'm out in public doing my grocery shopping. Now I know how to look for it when I look at my 13-year-old's Instagram page. I know what I'm looking for. I know how these things work. And then we can create opportunities for businesses to engage in the movement. And then we see even further down the line, finding employment opportunities for people who have experienced exploitation is very important, but doing the work to get to that stage is very important. And sometimes we have businesses that come from the angle of, well, do you know survivors who are qualified to work for us? And we turn the question around and we say, well, we're not really sure that you're qualified to hire people who've experienced trauma. And like everyone has mentioned, most people have experienced some kind of trauma, and that looks really different across a lot of landscapes. And so we put the burden on the business to do that educational work and to do that engagement with the community work, and to then learn how to lead with a trauma-informed approach that incorporates compassion and confidentiality, because like Sarah mentioned, no one has to disclose their experience, but we should feel safe in our places of employment to disclose, I need this accommodation because I have something that interferes with my work and I just need a 10-minute break every 2 hours. And we should be allowed to say that without having to share the scope of our problem or how we got it. But we do want to create businesses that say, cool, we don't need to know anything more than that. We will make that happen for you.
Thank you, Hannah.
I just want to piggyback to just kind of combo of what Sarah and Hannah had said. I think when we're talking about how do we create safe businesses that are educated on trauma and hiring people that are going to be dealing with the results of their trauma, I think we again skip something of where a business is, Sarah touched on it, a business is going to be, if it's owned by one person, that business is going to adapt around that one person's biases, their core beliefs, their how they interact day to day with others, because that person is going to project that into their business and what they create around that, which goes into policy and programming and the hiring process and all of those things, right? And so I think first and foremost, when we're talking about solutions to anything, I wouldn't be me if I didn't mention that the core is always going to start with us checking ourselves, checking our own biases, checking how we are projecting into the community, how we're projecting to our employees, how we're projecting to our coworkers, how we're projecting to the stranger that we walk by at the grocery store, and comparing that to how we interact with the people we come in contact with every single day, or our children. How are we projecting to the community, and how are we bringing everything that is instilled in us to our place of work? How are we bringing that into our hiring process? How am I might say that my business is trauma informed. I might say that my business is inclusive and it represents all diverse populations. But if I internally have a moral compass that is different from that, or have my own internal biases, for example, when we're talking about sex trafficking, of what a prostitute looks like, or what somebody who was trafficked as a child looks like, if I have that bias in my head, it doesn't matter what the policy around me is or what I think I'm creating around me, that my bias is going to project into that interview, into that hiring process, into that interaction with that individual. So we got to check ourselves first and foremost all the time. And there's no better time to do it than this day and age when we're facing pandemics and we're facing social justice issues right at the palm of our hands every single day. And the people around us are really being hurt, are dying, are really going through a lot of traumatic events within their own lives, including ourselves. And so now is a great time to check ourselves first and foremost and stop separating who I am at work versus who I am at home, because you are who you are all the time. And it doesn't matter if I walk through that door and clock in, punch in, type in, I'm still going to be that individual that I am in the world when I step out and clock out. And so we have to be who we want the world to mirror. We have to be the change that we want to see, with whether that's our workplace, our homes, or our communities.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Okay, just we have 7 minutes left. And I also want to open the question for the people listening to us. Marisa, yes, if you can be like.
Yeah, I really like to, that we're addressing, sexual exploitation. But in my world, we also have labor and sexual exploitation together. And we cannot eliminate also the people that have been traumatized under labor laws and under the worst abuse that you have ever seen. My first victim was in the strawberry fields. We're talking about 2001. And she was prostituted in the fields of shame, meaning in outside brothels. But at the same time, she was picking strawberries and then tomatoes. So at this point, it is, on the workplace, where is it that, what do they know? The labor factor of exploitation is just as traumatic as the sex trafficking too. And I just wanted to add that because a lot of them on domestic servitude, massage parlors, and other things also come into play with that. So we need to consider a trauma-informed, idea of all forms of trafficking. And even though sex trafficking sometimes is the most prevalent because they are the ones that can get a work permit right away, but there are others that can also work that have both a labor trauma and a sex trauma at the same time. I just wanted to add that we just not can eliminate that population from addressing it. Plus the language barriers, the cultural differences are very important. Okay, if you've been trafficked from another country and now you have a work permit and you speak perfect English, your cultural differences are still there. So one of the things that I like employers to figure out is understand cross-cultural issues. I think Sarah would know that, if you have a diverse population working in a place, you may also get traumatized by this, by this at the same time of whatever other traumas you have suffered. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. It's very important to not forget. And we're talking about human trafficking in general, that we want to succeed in general. We have 4 minutes left with our presentation, but I would like to state some comments here. One from the audience, one says, trauma is caused by capitalists. And the other one says, as an employer, this is very enlightening. And I would like to use that for one last question. For that employer, I hope you're still here with us. What recommendations would you suggest to improve the experience in the workplace? I'm not sure if the person who made this comment is still there with us on Facebook, but if you're there, any question that you would like to submit today? She is with us. Okay, so I would like to see if you have a question as an employer to see how can you try help drivers to have an experience in the workplace.
So are you asking how, like one recommendation on how to make a better workspace?
Because we have someone in the audience that is an employer. So she stated that this is very enlightening. So she's still with us, and I'm asking her if she has a question for the panel.
Oh, okay. Got it.
That she would like to give us a recommendation or ask how to improve the experience for drivers at workplace. So I'm pretty sure Alora is right now checking on with her. And what
Well, he's checking in. I just want to add, if that's okay, like, I think sometimes too, we need to remember part of being trauma informed, especially in the workspace, is going to be, for me, in my personal experience, I do not like to step into the room and it feel like there's this hot spotlight on me because I'm a survivor. So I think overemphasis on the fact that people are coming in, I think part of creating a productive, healthy, trauma-informed workspace is going to be not making people feel like there's these overextensive policies that have to go into place just for them, just to make, because then it's almost like re-traumatizing them, trying to not traumatize them. And I think part of the empowerment aspect within the workspace is people coming in from these experiences that are not the norm for most, and feeling so out of place. And so create trauma informed isn't always using the right verbiage or using, not moving too fast or having certain colors on the wall. Sometimes it's just helping people feel that sense of fitting in and quote unquote normalcy, if that's even a thing anymore, but kind of not overemphasizing the fact that, oh, we gotta make sure we're not saying this or we're not saying that to make sure this person doesn't feel offended. I think just approaching people as you would want to be approached or how you would want to be interacted with, that in itself can really take off the stress of trying to create this overly trauma-informed environment, because that's traumatic too, is constantly putting the spotlight on somebody's trauma by not talking about their trauma, and by forcing them to feel like so many things have to be adapted for just them in order for the workspace to be productive. And that tends to push you to not feel normal. And so it's kind of finding that balance of just, how would you want somebody to approach you? How would you want somebody to talk to your child? Or how would you want somebody to talk to you on a day-to-day basis? And so I think that, I don't know, hopefully that made sense. I just wanted to point out that sometimes we can overly empathize with people, and that can in itself push people away to not want to be in that work environment either. So that balance is really important.
Thank you, Jamie. Well, we have reached our time for this panel today. I would like to see if there's any comment or question from the audience before we leave. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As we close from this general discussion, please feel free to send any questions. If you've seen this and the recording and you still have some questions, we're gonna be checking and monitoring, and we will try to follow up as soon as we can. And I want to thank you, Jamie, for being here and share with us, Marisa, Hannah, Sarah, and Jamie. I think we still have a lot to talk. I think we need more than one session for this. And I want to thank you all for being here and express with all this passion what we want to achieve. Thank you, everyone, and we will meet again in another of these presentations with for equity. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.